Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. In this video, a crazy out-of-control neighbor Karen shot me because I am a military veteran. She claimed that I am a criminal. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. So I'm a 45-year-old veteran who has lived in my suburban neighborhood for the past decade. After serving 2 tours as a combat medic, I settled into a quiet life here, finding peace in tending to my garden and keeping to myself. My late partner James and I bought this house together, and even though he passed away from cancer 5 years ago, I have maintained the garden we started together as a way to honor his memory. Well, the trouble started about a year ago when Karen, not her real name, moved in across the street. From day one, she made it her mission to fix everything she deemed wrong with our neighborhood. She would patrol the streets with her phone out, filming people she thought were violating some kind of obscure HOA rule or documenting what she called problematic behavior. Most neighbors learned to avoid her, but somehow I became her primary target. Honestly, at first I tried to be friends with her. In the first couple of days after moving in, I brought her cookies and tried to make her feel welcome. I might have misjudged the situation by thinking Karen herself is gay. From what I could tell, she was always wearing beautiful, colorful clothes and had a strange haircut with blue hair. My mom always told me when I was young to not judge a book by its cover. Well, in this case, the book had a colorful, beautiful cover, but the inside was rotten to the core. It started with small things. She would stand on her porch, arms crossed, watching me work in my garden, while loudly talking on her phone about toxic masculinity in the military, and how veterans are tools of the imperial war machine. At first I ignored it. Everyone's entitled to their opinions, even if they are shouting them across the street. But then she started approaching my house visitors, mostly other veterans I volunteer with, to lecture them about violence and militarism. One morning I found pamphlets about de-radicalizing right-wing extremists stuffed in my mailbox. When I was helping Mrs. Moore next door with her groceries, Karen came over to warn her that I was probably grooming her for something nefarious. She had never bothered to learn that I've been helping Mrs. Moore since her hip surgery 3 years ago, or that she has basically adopted me as her honorary son. "I know what you are," she would say whenever we crossed paths. "You cannot hide your bigotry from me. I'm too woke for your manipulation tactics." The irony of her assumptions about me would have been funny if it hadn't been so frustrating. Yes, I'm a veteran, but I was a medic. And yes, I'm quiet and keep to myself, but that's more about still processing my grief over James than any hidden hatred. And yes, I have a crew cut and dog tags, but they are as much a reminder of my service partner Diego, who saved my life twice, as they are of my military time. But Karen did not want to know any of this. She had created a narrative about who I was, and nothing was gonna change her mind. She would post about me on Nextdoor, describing me as a dangerous element in our progressive community. When I started hosting monthly barbecues for LGBTQ+ veterans in my backyard, she somehow interpreted this as me mocking the gay community. I tried to handle things diplomatically. I spoke with her calmly several times, asking her to please stop spreading rumors about me, and I even offered to have coffee with her to clear up any misunderstandings. Her response? "I don't dialogue with fascists. I'm proud to be woke and morally superior to people like you." Looking back, I should have documented everything better from the start, but I honestly thought she would eventually get bored and move on to harassing someone else. Which, by the way, is also not a good mindset, let me tell you. Either way, I was wrong, so very wrong. The situation started escalating in ways I never expected. Karen began following me when I went for my morning walks, filming me while narrating about monitoring potential threats to community safety. She would show up at a local council meetings to speak about the dangers of allowing military personnel to live in civilian neighborhoods. When I had my veteran support group over for coffee, she would stand at the edge of my property with protest signs about war criminals. Anyway though, the real turning point came during one of our monthly LGBTQ+ veterans barbecues. We were all in my backyard sharing stories and supporting each other as we always did. One of our newer members had just come out to his unit and was telling us about the surprisingly positive response he had received. It was a beautiful moment of progress and acceptance, exactly the kind of story we gathered to share, but that is when we heard Karen's voice over her fence. "Look at these murderers mocking the gay community. You should all be ashamed." Diego, my old service partner who had driven 3 hours to be there, stood up and said, "Ma'am, you've got it all wrong. This is literally a..." But Karen cut him off and said, "Don't you dare to mansplain me. I've been an ally for 6 whole months and I know performative activism when I see it." I finally had enough. I walked to the fence, keeping my voice level despite my anger, and said, "Karen, these gatherings are private. Please stop harassing my guests." "Private?" She scoffed. "Like your secret hate group meetings are private? I see right through you, pretending to support the LGBTQ+ community while perpetuating military violence." "There's no pretense here," I said. "You're interrupting a support group for LGBTQ+ veterans. We have every right to meet in peace." Her face got red and she said, "How dare you? I'm proud to be woke and morally superior to violent bigots like you. You are mocking real LGBTQ+ people with this performance." "Karen," I said, trying to maintain my composure, "you don't know anything about me or my guests. Please leave us alone." "I know exactly what you are," she shrieked. "You're all just playing dress-up to mock the real struggles of marginalized people." That is when she pulled out her phone and started live streaming, walking onto my property despite my explicit demands for her to leave. She approached our group, phone held high, spouting buzzwords about documenting hate groups and exposing military toxicity. Several of my guests got up to leave, not wanting to be filmed without consent. This only encouraged Karen, who started following them, demanding that they admit to being part of a hate group. I stepped between her and my departing friends. "This is harassment, Karen. Leave now or I'm calling the police." "Of course you would resort to calling the police," she sneered. "That is what fascists do when they are exposed." What happened next still feels surreal. As I reached for my phone to call 911, Karen suddenly reached into her purse and the next thing I knew, there was a loud sound and my hand exploded in pain. The next few moments passed in a blur of motion and sound. As I clutched my bleeding hand, Diego and 2 other veterans immediately moved to subdue Karen, their medical training kicking in even as they dealt with the threat. The small pistol, which we later learned she had obtained through questionable means, clattered to the ground. "How dare you assault me?" Karen screamed as she was carefully restrained. "I was defending myself from fascist aggression." The irony of her using a gun while claiming to be a pacifist was not lost on anyone. One of my guests, a trauma nurse, was already working on my hand while another one called 911. Through the pain, I noticed Karen was still trying to film with her free hand, narrating about how she was being attacked by a militia. When the police arrived minutes later, they found a scene that defied Karen's narrative: a group of medical professionals providing first aid, her gun secured safely away from everyone, and multiple witnesses with cell phone footage of the entire incident. "He threatened me," Karen tried to tell the officers. "They are all dangerous extremists." That is when I finally lost my patience. Still being treated for the gunshot wound, I looked her in the eye and said, "Karen, I'm gay. James, my partner of 15 years, died of cancer 5 years ago. We bought this house together. These monthly barbecues, they are LGBTQ+ veteran support groups. I've tried to be patient with your assumptions and harassment, but you just shot me for being something I am not while attacking something I actually am." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, confusion, and then something that might have been shame before settling back into righteous indignation. "You're lying," she finally sputtered. "This is just more manipulation." The bullet had gone through my hand, thankfully missing any major tendons, but requiring surgery and physical therapy. The doctors were optimistic about a full recovery, though they warned it would take time. The evidence against Karen was overwhelming. Beyond the obvious gunshot wound, we had multiple witnesses, including medical professionals, and cell phone recordings from several guests. We found out that she had been asked to leave several activist groups for what they termed counterproductive extremism. Her social media was full of posts about being the most woke person in any room and how she was morally superior to everyone else. She did not get a plea deal given the severity of the charges and the clear premeditation shown by bringing a weapon to what she claimed was a peaceful protest. During the trial, her defense tried to paint her as a passionate activist who felt threatened, but her own social media posts and history of harassment undermined this narrative. Karen was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, trespassing, harassment, and several weapon charges. She is now serving a 7-year sentence with mandatory counseling as part of her sentence. Her social media activism has been replaced by prison blog posts about being politically persecuted. The neighborhood has largely returned to normal, Mrs. Moore still comes over for Sunday dinner, my garden is thriving, and our veteran support group has actually grown, though we now meet at a community center with better security. My hand is healing well, though the cold weather makes it ache. The doctors say that it's likely permanent, but considering what could have happened, I'm grateful it was not worse. Diego visits more often now, claiming it is because he misses my cooking, but I know he is still worried about me. However, here is where I might be the a-hole. Some people, including Karen's remaining supporters, say I should have told her that I was gay from the start. They argue I could have prevented the escalation by being more open about my identity and James. A few neighbors suggested I encouraged her behavior by not engaging with her attempts at dialogue early on. And yes, I do feel a slight bit guilty for what happened, but then again, Karen might have had severe mental issues, otherwise all of this is hard to explain. I maintained that my sexual orientation and personal loss were private matters that I shouldn't have had to share to avoid being shot. I believe everyone has the right to privacy and shouldn't have to disclose personal info to prove that they are not a bigot. And yeah guys, I would 100% agree with OP here. He is not in the wrong in the slightest here. He's the person that got shot. These neighbors are absolutely crazy. Anyway, after everything that's happened, I find myself wondering, am I the jerk for not being more open from the start? Should I have handled things differently? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP handled this wrong? Let me know in the comments. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. Your sexual orientation is your business and you shouldn't have to out yourself to prove that you're not a bigot. Karen was not interested in dialogue and she wanted a target for her performative activism and found one in you. She escalated to violence when her assumptions were challenged. That is on her, not you. Comment number 2, hard anti-A. As a member of the LGBTQ+ community, people like Karen who use wokeness as a weapon while actually harming marginalized people makes me furious. You don't owe anyone your coming out story, and her assumptions about what a gay person should look like are just another form of prejudice. Comment number 3, everyone sucks here. Karen is obviously the bigger a-hole and deserves her prison sentence, no question there, but OP, you had multiple opportunities to de-escalate this situation. You knew she was volatile and escalating, but you kept hosting gatherings that you knew would trigger her. You did not need to out yourself, but you could have filed for a restraining order or taken legal action way before it got to this point. You chose to just ignore the problem until it literally blew up in your face. Yes, she's criminally responsible, but you're not completely blameless in letting this spiral out of control. And yeah guys, I would definitely 100% disagree with that last comment. That person might have lost the plot. Either way, the next one is another story about an awful neighbor. So this grudge has been simmering for almost a year now and has only just come to fruition. It began with my next door neighbor leaving me a passive-aggressive note for having trash outside my door while I was cleaning my apartment. 2 important points here. Number 1, I was deep cleaning because the landlord sent a note saying the adjoining apartment, my neighbors, had roaches. I needed to clean so the exterminator could see if my apartment was infested as well. Number 2, the trash was by my door for 30 minutes at most. I was trying to save a trip to the dumpster and doing a final sweep of the apartment before heading down. Now, prior to this incident, this neighbor had already pissed me off by constantly blaring their loud music to the point where my apartment walls vibrated. Fortunately for them, I preferred to avoid confrontation, so I never called them out on it. After the passive-aggressive note calling me a pig though, all bets were off. She wrote that I should read my lease, since I left my nasty trash everywhere. Okay Karen, it is on. I read my lease like I was snorting coke off of it. Every time they played their loud music, I filed a noise complaint. When I got a whiff of pot coming from their apartment, I filed another complaint. The lease says that tenants must comply with the state's drug laws or risk eviction, so hey, another win for me. Finally, they brought a dog into the apartment despite the no pets policy exception only being for service animals. This was obviously not a service dog since it howled day and night, betraying no semblance of training. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who complained after that final stunt, since my landlord said the noisy dog problem was being taken care of through litigation and my next door's neighbor's lease would not be renewed. I guess he should have read it. And the next one is titled, Rich Family Mocked Me for Being Poor. And by the way, if you enjoy these stories, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments to show that you're a true Ripe Story fan. Thank you so much. So I come from poverty, it is what it is. I had a very rich childhood in all the ways except financially. Christmas was saved for year round and we got one thing to wear, one book and one fun thing. My husband, on the other hand, comes from a family that grossed $300K a year and Christmas was always a massive show-off. Each kid had $2,000+ under the tree easily. My husband and I started dating 5 years ago and have been married for 2.5. We have clawed our way up in life. He was not given financial help as an adult, and this year is the first time we can spend some decent money on Christmas. He has been wanting a guitar for some time. He has never played and has expressed interest so many times, but we couldn't do it financially. I did lots of research, and from what I saw, beginner guitars were $150 each and went from there up to your $5K for really nice ones. I agonized over what I was gonna choose and ended up telling him to cut the budget for me so that I could surprise him with a really nice gift, or so I thought. My original budget was $500, but I really wanted to go big or go home, and it ended up being around 900 Canadian dollars plus 200 for accessories or so. Being able to spend that amount is just unfathomable for a former poor kid like me, but I did it because he deserves it, and we finally have the means, and I was beyond excited to see his face light up. Well, Christmas morning comes and the tree gifts wait until his family arrives. I'm basically giddy at this point with excitement. Our turn comes for couple gifts and I bring the guitar case out from its hiding place. He is so excited, opens the case, revealing the guitar, and then, "Oh, thanks babe, never heard of this brand." Not the overwhelming joy I was hoping for, but it's not about me, right? His brother says, "Oh, it's nice, a decent cheapy one to start out with." His dad chimes in, having played in his 20s, and says it is known for its lower end models and they'd be happy to chip in for a nice one next year if he sticks with it. I've never felt such a punch to the gut. I assume I'm overthinking as per usual, but I am so devastated from this 10 seconds of today and I cannot even really verbalize why. It felt like I was 9 years old again, trying to be excited about my new Aeropostale hoodie with my friend that got a MacBook and a Disney trip for Christmas. I think those comments affected how my husband viewed it too, because he hasn't touched it since, despite wanting it so badly for years. Update: I spoke with him this morning, trying to be very calm. I'm not confrontational by nature, so I put my anger aside and went into it with patience and grace. I asked if he was upset about the guitar, either the brand choice, the appearance or something. I told him my feelings were hurt when his family made comments, even if unintentionally, that made it seem like I chose a child starter instrument or something. I explained that I had put a lot of thought and research into the build, the color, everything, so make sure his first experience with a guitar was very positive. He was shocked to hear that I'd been thinking about it that way. He didn't think twice about what his family said. He apologized for their reaction and explained that his comment about the brand was nothing more than what it seemed. He had never heard of the brand, that's all. He said he loved it and was just caught up on the craziness of Christmas, which is why he hadn't played it yet. It eased my mind a lot. I guess I'm just used to over-the-top reactions in my family. I think I'm still disappointed after a month's worth of excitement. Building was slashed pretty quickly, but at the end of the day, knowing he likes it makes their opinion mean a lot less. And yeah guys, I definitely feel for OP. I would not be able to handle a family that acts like this, but thank God my wife's family is pretty decent. To end the video, we will read one last story from r/petty revenge. It is titled, The Time My Parents Told Me Not to Touch the Thermostat. A few years back, I was watching my parents' house while they went out of town. My stepdad is a decent dude, but they were supposedly having issues with the thermostat. I say supposedly because my grandma was also living with them, and the three of them never agreed on temperature. When they were getting ready to leave, he told me, "Don't touch the thermostat." I responded with something like, "Well, what if it gets too hot or too cold?" "No, just don't touch it." Okay, got it. Well, for context, they live in the south, so we usually had and currently have the AC running. Lo and behold, a cold, nothing crazy, front came through. I don't prefer the cold, but I sure do enjoy being in blankets when it's cold. So as the temperature dropped, I would just add another blanket to my hibernation pile, but I sure as hell was not gonna touch the thermostat. He made that very clear. Well, by the time they got back, the thermostat was at 50 degrees. When they walked in, they immediately were like, "What the F? Is the thermostat broken?" I looked directly at them and said, "I don't know. You told me not to touch it." And well, ripe stars, because that story was so short, we will read one last one from r/pettyrevenge. It is titled, Outsmarting Your Crooked Partner Can Be Very Satisfying. Years ago, at 26, I entered a partnership in a small CD/music store with a man in his 50s who already owned another store. The partnership was meant to share buying costs and advertising. Once we opened, I discovered he was skimming inventory, and we had leased a much larger space than necessary under the pretense of him subleasing the extra space for his office, which, by the way, never happened. After 3 exhausting years, during which he continued his dishonest practices, the store went broke. We had around 25k in equipment and another 20k in inventory. Although he ripped me off to avoid a legal battle, I agreed that we would sell off the remaining inventory and equipment and split the profits. I needed to get away from him quickly, even though my share would be far less than what he took from me. My star employee/manager, whom my partner had since taken to his other store, informed me that my partner was negotiating a sale of everything the next morning to settle a debt of his. Realizing my partner intended to keep me in the dark, I hired movers to empty the storage garage we had rented. I took back all of my belongings early the next morning. As we were leaving, I saw the other truck arriving. Later that day, my ex-manager confirmed that the truck was from the debt collector. Their crew arrived to find the garage empty. They ended up in court, each accusing the other. It ended with my ex-partner still on the hook for his debt. I called him, acting like I wanted the update on when we would sell the inventory and furnishings, and he simply said it was stolen. I just hung up as if I was upset. I sold off the remaining equipment over the next year and slowly recouping part of my losses. Had he been honest with me, at least during our liquidation, nearly 20k of that would have been his. In total, he took much more than that from me, so no, I didn't feel like I took a thing from him. Fast forward 4 to 5 years, I spotted him in a restaurant parking lot as I was driving off. He smugly asked how I was doing, fully aware of his wrongdoing. I replied that I was fantastic, and then with a huge grin I said, "So you still haven't figured out where the stuff went?" His smug smile turned to fury as I drove off, telling him to have a wonderful day. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.